Keisha woke before the sun climbed fully into the sky. She left her small house just as the last stars faded, the air cool and fresh. She tied her shoelaces carefully, making sure each loop was neat. Her backpack felt heavier than usual, but she did not mind. Every morning, she reminded herself that school was her chance to learn things that would help her build a future. She trudged along the quiet street, the sound of her footsteps keeping time with her heartbeat. On her way, she passed the corner store where Mr. Patel was arranging fruit outside. He greeted her with a warm smile and a cheerful wave. Keisha returned his greeting and slowed for a moment to choose an apple for her lunch. Mr. Patel wrapped it gently in paper and slipped it into her bag. She thanked him softly and continued on her path, her blue jacket bright against the gray morning. As she approached the school gates, the noise of children grew louder. Groups of friends chatted and laughed, their voices echoing through the courtyard. Keisha kept her eyes forward and stepped past them, her pace steady. She carried herself with quiet confidence, though deep inside she felt a familiar flutter of nerves. She did not want to be late. A few feet from the gate, she felt the change in the air. The laughter dimmed, and a circle of shadows formed ahead. Keisha slowed, noticing 4 older students standing in a loose semicircle. 2 of them leaned against the brick wall of the building, arms folded. The other 2 fidgeted with their phone and the hem of their shirt. All 4 wore the same mocking grins, smiles that did not reach their eyes. Keisha recognized them from the previous weeks. They were known for targeting students who looked different or alone. She swallowed, her heart picking up speed. But she refused to turn back. She had walked this path every morning for months, and she would not let fear change her routine. She kept walking. As she drew closer, the tallest boy stepped forward and dropped his bag to the ground with a deliberate thud. He was nearly a foot taller than Keisha, broad-shouldered, and he bent down so his face was just inches from hers. His breath smelled of gum and something sour. Well, he said softly, his voice like gravel. Look who's here all. By herself, Keisha held her head up. She met his gaze but did not respond. She could feel her pulse in her throat, but she forced herself to take a slow breath. She remembered her grandmother's words. When you face fear, stand steady. The world respects those who do not waver. The boy reached out and tugged at her backpack strap, his fingers rough against the fabric. He gave it a quick jerk. How about we have a little fun? He sneered. Without warning, the girl in the group, tall and lean, stepped in front of him. She had amber eyes that flickered like fire. She tilted her head and said, Yeah, look at her jacket, so bright. Doesn't she know not everyone likes color? The other 2 bullies laughed. One pointed at Keisha's hair, braided into neat cornrows. Nice hair, he said, voice dripping with fake sweetness. But you know, girls like you stick out. You don't belong here. Keisha's stomach twisted. She felt the weight of their eyes on her skin. The words burned like ice. Yet she kept her hands in her pockets and her shoulders straight. She would not show that they hurt her. One of the boys nudged Keisha's shoulder. The push was light, but meant to embarrass her. She stumbled, but managed to keep her balance. A few curious students paused nearby, whispering to each other. Keisha saw the fear in their eyes, the fear of stepping in, of becoming targets themselves. The tallest boy laughed and knocked her backpack again. Books spilled out onto the pavement. She knelt to gather them, her fingers shaking as she stacked them into a neat pile. She kept her back to the bullies, not wanting to give them the satisfaction of seeing her upset. Ah, look at her, playing teacher's pet, the girl taunted. She leaned down to inspect the spilled books, then flicked one off the pile, landed with a heavy thump on the ground, pages rustling open. The bullies laughed again. Time seemed to stretch. Keisha's breaths came in quick gusts, but her arms moved slowly and deliberately. She picked up each book, pressed them to her chest, and zipped her backpack shut. Then she stood tall, her eyes meeting the boy who had initiated. They're teasing. For a moment, nothing happened. The boy blinked at her, surprised. He expected tears or a sob or maybe a quick retreat. Instead, Keisha's face was calm, her gaze steady. The world shrank to just the five of them, her, the boy, the girl by his side, and the two others waiting for the show. Then the boy reached out again and shoved her hard. This time, she let him. The shove sent her a few steps back. A gasp rose from the cluster of onlookers. A teacher stood at the edge of the field, phone in hand, but she was not yet moving. The rest of the students watched, frozen in place. Keisha steadied herself. Her legs felt shaky, but she planted her feet firmly. She remembered the karate classes she had taken with Uncle Marcus when she was 12. She recalled how he had taught her to shift her weight, to breathe out at the moment of impact, to let the force move through her rather than pushing back directly. The boy stepped forward again, raising his fist as if to punch. His eyes were wild with amusement and cruelty. Keisha felt her own pulse surge, her blood pumping louder in her ears. In that instant, her fear sharpened into focus. She did not think about hitting him. She thought only about standing her ground. When the boy lunged, Keisha twisted her body, ducking under his arm. She brought her elbow up quickly, aiming for his ribs, and landed a solid strike. The boy grunted and stumbled sideways, his hand dropping to his side. Shock registered on his face. Seeing their leader falter, the other three jumped in. One tried to grab Keisha from behind, another aimed a swing, and the girl clapped her hand over her mouth in astonishment. But Keisha moved like water. She stepped back, spun to face the one behind her, and delivered a swift kick to his shin. He yelped and fell to his knees. Keisha's breathing was steady now. She felt her muscles respond on their own, guided by instinct and training. She sidestepped the swinging arm of the second boy and landed a palm strike to his chest. He flew back several feet and hit the ground hard, the air knocked out of him. By then, a small crowd had gathered, and a teacher came running forward. The school bell rang, but no one moved. The four bullies lay in various stages of dazed shock, their bravado drained away. Keisha stood tall among them, pack on her back, hair in place, jacket free of scuffs. The teacher pushed through the students. He looked first at Keisha, then at the fallen bullies. He helped Keisha to stand a bit straighter and asked if she was all right. Keisha nodded, her chest rising and falling evenly. She felt no regret, only relief that she had ended the fight quickly. The bullies scrambled to their feet, rubbing sore spots and staring at Keisha with disbelief. Some of the onlookers whispered words of praise. One boy said, "Wow, you were awesome." Another nodded. The teacher guided Keisha aside to calm her and asked for her side of the story. As she explained calmly what happened, Keisha felt her heart slow to a comfortable pace. She knew she had defended herself, but she also felt sadness that it had come to that. When she finished, the teacher promised to handle the bullies and make sure it would not happen again. Later, when she rejoined her classmates, they looked at her differently. The girls who used to ignore her now offered quiet friendship. The boys who had frowned now gave respectful nods. Keisha stepped into the classroom with new strength in her walk. She took her seat and opened her notebook. Her morning had begun with fear, but it ended with her knowing that standing up for herself was worth every moment of doubt she felt before. The next day felt heavier for Keisha. She woke to the same pale light through her window, but in her chest there was a weight she could not lift. Her muscles still ached from yesterday's collision, though she barely noticed the bruises forming. On her ribs, she dressed slowly, tugging the blue jacket over her head and pulling on her shoes as if each movement needed extra care. In the mirror, she studied her own face. It looked calm, but her eyes told another story, one of worry and of resolve. On the walk to school, Keisha passed the corner store again. Mr. Patel offered her an apple, but she shook her head.
"I'll wait today."
She only wanted to reach the gates without thinking. She kept her gaze forward, her steps brisk. The gate loomed ahead, and she braced herself for what might come. Every student seemed to whisper as she passed, but she could not tell whether they spoke of her or simply of yesterday's surprising scene. Inside the hallway, lockers clanged and feet shuffled. She heard a soft murmur when she neared her own locker, then sudden laughter when she turned to lock it. There were 3 of the bullies waiting by her bag. The tall boy leaned with one shoulder against the metal door, arms crossed. Next to him, the girl with the amber eyes waited with her phone raised, ready to record. Two others hovered behind, smirking. They formed a barrier she had to walk through to reach her first class. Keisha paused. A rush of heat spread through her cheeks. She remembered her grandmother's advice again. Don't let them see you fear. The world cannot bully the brave. She took a breath and stepped forward. The tall boy pushed his phone into her face. Smile for the camera, he said, as if she were some circus act. The girl behind him giggled and tapped the record button. Keisha's heart galloped, but she lifted her chin. I don't want to be in your video, she said, in a clear voice. The boy laughed, but that laughter felt brittle, forced. He leaned closer, too close. You're going to be famous, he sneered. Everyone will see what a weak little girl you are. As his words hit her ears, her palms grew damp. She felt the eyes of passing students on her back. Some looked away quickly. Others whispered to each other. One boy rolled his eyes and walked off, shaking his head. Keisha felt a spark of hope that not everyone was against her. The tall boy reached out to flick her braid. Boring hair, he jeered. You look like a doll. The girl behind him called out, Tell us why you wear that stupid jacket. Every day? You out of ideas? The other two pushed her on the shoulders, just enough to break her balance. Keisha stumbled, but she did not fall. She steadied herself and faced them squarely. Her heart pounded so loud she thought everyone must hear it. She wanted to yell, to cry, to shove them back, but she held her tongue. She remembered the karate lessons with Uncle Marcus. Breathe, stay calm, move with purpose. I have to go to class, she said, voice firm. Let me pass. She slid past them, keeping just enough distance so they could not touch her again. The tall boy reached out to trip her, but Keisha caught his hand with a quick twist of her wrist. He yanked back, startled, and kept his balance by grabbing the locker next to hers. The girl with the phone clicked off the recording and mouthed the word coward, but her eyes looked uneasy, unsure. Keisha locked her locker and made her way down the hall. She heard the girl's mocking laugh behind her, but she refused to look back. Each step forward felt like walking through mud, but she forced her legs to move. She felt dizzy, but she would not stop. She pressed her lips together and found the classroom door at last. She slipped inside, closed it softly, and sank into her seat by the window. The teacher began the lesson, but Kesha's thoughts were elsewhere. She could still feel the scratch of the bully's finger on her braid, the sting of their words. She thought about home, about her grandmother's gentle hands as she braided her hair each morning. She thought about her mother's smile when Keisha brought home a good grade. She thought about the advice she had read once in a book. Stand for yourself, and others will stand with you. Lunchtime arrived, a tray of rice and chicken and beans waiting under the harsh cafeteria lights. Keisha carried her tray to a table in the corner, hoping to eat in peace. But as she passed, a boy spilled his milk on purpose, timing the splash so that it dripped onto her shoe. He saw the wet spot and snickered, drawing the attention of three others. One knocked her tray, and her rice slid off onto the floor. She froze, staring at the mess. She heard laughter from the bullies' table at the far end. They waved at her, as if inviting more chaos. A girl at the next table looked at her with pity, but did nothing. Keisha knelt to scoop rice back onto her tray, her fingers sticky and cold. She could feel her cheeks burning. Her first instinct was to slam the tray down and stomp away, but she remembered her grandmother's kindness. Choose your strength wisely. So she worked quietly, gathering every grain she could salvage. When she stood, a custodian offered paper towels. Keisha nodded her thanks and dabbed at her shoe before walking to the sink. As she washed her hands, she watched her reflection. In the mirror, her eyes looked tired, but they held a fierce light. She took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Back at her table, she sat down and ate in silence. The taste of food felt dull, but she chewed carefully, reminding herself that nourishment would give her the energy she needed. After a few bites, she closed her eyes and imagined the calm of her grandmother's living room, the scent of fresh tea and warm biscuits. She let that image soothe her. The final period arrived, and Keisha walked to English class. The teacher, Mrs. Davis, greeted her with a kind nod. Keisha sat near the front, hoping the distance from the others would help. Mrs. Davis began to read from a poem about courage. As each line fell softly from her lips, Keisha felt a thread of connection. She raised her hand and shared a thought about standing up for what you believe in. Mrs. Davis smiled proudly. When the bell rang to end the day, Keisha gathered her things and walked toward the door. She passed the group of bullies again at the exit hallway. The tall boy looked at her with surprise, as if he had expected her to leave in tears. The girl with the amber eyes tapped her phone, but then she stopped herself from recording. The other two just stared. Keisha held her head high and stepped over the threshold. The sunlight hit her face, and she felt its warmth. She breathed in the air and remembered something her mother once told her: "Every storm ends, and the sun will find you again." She walked out of the school building and onto the blacktop, where parents waited in cars and buses lined up in a row. Saw her father's old sedan at the end of the line. He waved when he saw her. Keisha waved back and offered a small smile. Today had been hard, harder than any day before. But she had survived. She had faced their taunts and stayed true to herself. As she climbed into the car, her father asked how her day was. Keisha thought about the spilled rice, the mocking voices, and the weight in her chest. Then she thought of Mrs. Davis's poem, of her grandmother's wisdom, and of her own steady heartbeat. She told her father simply, it was okay, and she meant it. On the drive home, she stared out the window at the fading light. She knew the bullies would try again tomorrow, perhaps in new ways, perhaps with sharper words. But she also knew that she had the strength inside her to face them. She touched her braid gently and whispered to herself, I will not be afraid. When she reached home, her grandmother was waiting on the porch with a cup of tea. Keisha put down her bag and sat beside her. The tea smelled sweet and strong. As she sipped, she felt the warmth spread through her. Her grandmother asked if she wanted to talk, but Keisha only shook her head. She was tired, but she felt a quiet pride. That night, Keisha lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. The taunts still echoed in her mind, but they no longer hurt as much. She closed her eyes and let sleep come. Tomorrow, she knew, the bullies might gather again, whispering and pushing. But she would remember her grandmother's words, her uncle's lessons, and the courage she found in herself. She would face them once more. The next morning, Keisha woke to the soft light of dawn slipping through her curtains. She sat up slowly, her muscles still stiff from the day's challenges. She felt the weight of yesterday's events in every sore muscle and every bruise forming on her ribs. But more than the aches, she felt a quiet pride, as if she had proved something to herself. She lay still for a moment, breathing gently, and let the calm wash over her. Then she rose, dressed, and tied her shoes without a tremor of doubt. Today would be another test, she knew, but she was ready to face it. As she walked down the street, the world felt different. The air was cooler, and the sky glowed pale blue. Mr. Patel stood by his fruit stand. He called out her name and held up a ripe banana. Keisha smiled and thanked him, taking it gratefully. You look strong today, he said kindly. She nodded, clutching the banana in her backpack. She did not tell him about the fight. She only offered a quiet smile and continued on. Each step felt firmer than the one before. At the school gate, a crowd had gathered. Everyone seemed to be talking about her. Some whispered praises. Others stared openly. A few students pointed as she walked past. For a moment, Keisha felt nervous. She wondered if this attention was good or bad. She took a slow breath, remembering her grandmother's words. Courage is shining when the world looks at you. She squared her shoulders and kept walking, her eyes fixed ahead. Inside the hallway, she saw posters on the walls about kindness and respect. A new one showed students standing up for each other. Paused to read the words, "Be the friend you wish you had." She pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heart beat. She wished she could live up to those words. She reached her locker and opened it smoothly. Her books were arranged neatly, and her blue jacket hung on a peg. She smiled to herself, proud of the small order she kept. In class, Mrs. Davis greeted her warmly. "Good morning, Keisha," she said. I heard what happened. Want you to know I am very proud of you." Keisha's cheeks warmed, but she managed a calm thank you. The teacher gave her a reassuring nod before starting the lesson. As Mrs. Davis spoke of history and the acts of ordinary people who changed the world, Keisha felt a spark of connection. She realized that her own small act of courage fit into a much larger story of brave people everywhere. At lunch, Keisha carried her tray again to the quiet corner. This time, she found two classmates waiting for her. One was Jasmine, a girl who had sat alone in art class. The other was Miguel, the boy who had shaken his head at the bullies. Jasmine offered Keisha her spare sandwich, and Miguel handed her a small note. "We're sorry for what they did," it read. "We're your friends." Keisha felt tears. In her eyes, she nodded, her throat tight, and whispered thank you. She placed the note in her pocket and shared the sandwich. It tasted sweeter than any victory. The rest of the afternoon passed without incident. In gym class, Keisha joined a game of basketball. The coach praised her for her speed and her sharp reflexes. She made a decisive move to block the ball. Her teammates cheered. She smiled broadly, feeling the joy of movement instead of the fear of confrontation. By the time the final bell rang, she felt lighter than she had in days. Later, as she walked through the courtyard, she saw the 4 bullies gathered near the fountain. They looked tired and uncertain. The tallest boy stared at the ground, his posture small. The girl with the amber eyes stood back, biting her lip. Keisha's heart beat fast for a moment, but she kept walking. She did not look at them. She did not need to say anything. She passed. She felt a sudden sense of triumph.
Ow.
They had tried to make her small, and she had only grown. When she reached her final class, she discovered a letter posted on the classroom door. It bore the school logo and a neat signature from the principal. It read, "All students are expected to treat each other with respect. Any bullying will be met with appropriate consequence. We will hold a school assembly tomorrow on kindness." In unity, Keisha's chest swelled. She knew the bullies would face discipline. But more than that, the entire school was taking a stand. She felt hope rising within her. That evening at home, Keisha told her grandmother about the notes. From friends, the assembly, and the coach's praise. She held the small folded paper in her hand and traced the words. Her grandmother listened, her eyes bright with pride. She brewed chamomile tea and set 2 cups on the low table. They sat on the couch, feet tucked beneath them, and sipped in comfortable silence. Outside, the sun dipped below the rooftops, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Keisha spoke softly about her day. She admitted that she had been afraid when she saw the bullies again. Her grandmother nodded. "Bravery does not mean you have no fear," she said gently. "It means you face it anyway." Keisha smiled, feeling the truth of those words. She felt braver than the day before, as if a small flame of confidence had grown into a steady glow. Before bed, Keisha wrote in her journal. She wrote about how she had felt each moment, from the fear in the hallway to the pride on the basketball court. She described the warmth of friendship and the power of small acts of kindness. Then she wrote one sentence at the end. "I will stand tall, always." She closed the book and placed it on her bedside table. As she drifted to sleep, she dreamed of a bright field where children held hands in a circle. They smiled and looked at each other without fear. In the center stood Keisha, her blue jacket shining like a beacon. She felt safe and free. The sound of gentle laughter echoed around her. She woke before dawn, her heart calm, ready for whatever the new day would bring. The next morning, she walked to school with a light step. The assembly began in the gym, where banners hung with messages of respect. The principal spoke about unity and compassion. The bullies sat in the front row, heads bowed. When the principal asked for volunteers to share stories of kindness, Keisha raised her hand. She walked to the microphone and told the entire school how fear had made her quake, how she had found courage, and how small acts of friendship had given her strength. Her voice was steady, her words simple, but the impact was clear. When she finished, the hall erupted in applause. As she left the gym, students patted her on the back and thanked her. The bullies watched from their seats, faces solemn. guys realized that real change had begun, not just in herself, but in the hearts of those around her. And she knew that no matter what tomorrow held, she would face it with the same courage she had discovered in herself. The morning after the assembly, Keisha woke with a sense of calm determination. She dressed in her usual blue jacket and straightened her hair in the mirror. This day felt different. She had shared her story with the whole school yesterday, and now she wondered if things would change for real. As she walked to the corner store, Mr. Patel greeted her with a proud smile. He handed her a perfectly ripe orange. "For my brave friend," he said. Keisha thanked him, feeling warmth spread through her chest. At the school gate, she paused to look around. The courtyard was busy, but the usual tight circles of whispering students had broken up. Faces that used to turn away now offered nods, or soft hellos. She returned their greetings with a small smile and stepped inside. In the hallway, she saw a poster newly painted by art class. Two hands reaching out to each other, one dark-skinned, one light-skinned. With the words together, "We stand." Keisha pressed her palm against the cool wall and felt pride. Her first class of the day was math. As she walked past her locker, she noticed the tall boy leaning there alone. His head was bowed and his shoulders looked smaller than before. Keisha stopped, but did not look away. He met her gaze for a moment, his eyes uncertain. Then he turned and slipped away down the hallway. She felt a flicker of something compassion, maybe. She wished she could help him reshape his own story. In math class, the teacher wrote a tough problem on the board. Keisha listened carefully, her pencil tapping lightly against her desk. The boy from yesterday's fight, the one with the amber eyes, sat 2 rows behind her. He raised his hand and asked for help. Keisha glanced back at him. She hesitated, then nodded. When the teacher called on her, she explained the steps clearly. The girl's eyes widened, and she mouthed a thank you. Keisha turned back to her book, her heart warm with surprise. After class, Keisha walked to the library for her free period. She carried her books against her chest and past rows of shelves. As she opened a door to a quiet reading nook, she almost ran into the tallest boy. He stepped back, startled, looked at her with nervous eyes. "Keisha," he said softly, "can I talk to you?" Keisha felt her pulse quicken but nodded. They sat at a table near the window, where light pooled on the wooden surface. He cleared his throat. I wanted to say I'm sorry," he began. His voice was low, but steady. "For everything I did. I was wrong. I see that now." Keisha watched him closely as the awkward silence stretched between them. She remembered the fear he caused her. But she also remembered her grandmother's words about forgiveness. She took a breath and said, "Thank you for saying that. It means a lot." He looked relieved, as if he had carried a heavy bag and finally set it down. "I want to change," he said. "I don't know how, but I want to try." Keisha smiled gently. "Start by being kind. Small things matter," he nodded, hope flickering in his eyes. They agreed to walk to lunch together. A simple step, but one that felt huge. In the cafeteria, they joined a table where Jasmine and Miguel waited. At first, the other students glanced at them in surprise. Keisha introduced the boy, and he offered a quiet hello. No one laughed. Instead, one boy handed him a napkin, and a girl offered him a sandwich. The tall boy's shoulders relaxed, found a seat beside Keisha, and thanked her in a low voice. She nodded, glad to see him begin his own journey. The rest of the afternoon held small moments of connection. In art class, the amber-eyed girl asked if Keisha could help blend colors on her painting. Keisha leaned close and showed her how to mix blue and white to create a pale sky. The girl listened, her tongue pressed against her lip in concentration. When she finished, she tapped Keisha's arm and whispered, "Thanks." Keisha smiled, pleased that they could share something peaceful instead of harsh words. On the way home, Keisha noticed the 4 former bullies walking ahead of her. They moved as a group but did not shout or jeer. Instead, they walked in silence, heads low. Keisha slowed her pace and matched their steps. When they realized she was there, they stopped. "Right," the tallest boy said. "Thanks again for everything." "Today," the ambered girl added. "I'm sorry for recording you." The other 2 nodded in agreement. Keisha felt a lump in her throat. She simply said, "I forgive you." They exchanged quiet smiles and then parted ways. Keisha watched them disappear down the street. She felt a sense of relief and wonder. People could change, she thought. Those who had once been her enemy now walked beside her in small peace. That evening, Keisha and her grandmother sat at the kitchen table. Her grandmother placed a plate of warm corn muffins between them. "How was your day?" she asked softly. Keisha described each moment. The apology in the library, the shared lunch, the art class, and the walk home. Her grandmother listened, her eyes shining. When Keisha finished, her grandmother reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You have a brave and generous heart," she said. "You have changed more than just yourself today." Keisha smiled and bit into a muffin. The sweet crumbs melted in her mouth. She thought of the steps she had taken, small but powerful. She thought of the strength it took to stand up and the courage it took to forgive. As she lay in bed that night, she wrote in her journal, "Today I learned that kindness can heal." She closed the book and placed it on her nightstand. Outside, the moon shone bright and the air was still. Drifted to sleep with a peaceful smile. She dreamed of a school where everyone greeted each other with respect, where posters on the walls reminded students to be kind, and where no one ever faced fear alone. In her dream, she stood at the center of a circle of friends. They laughed and talked together, and she felt safe and free. Tomorrow would be the final part of her journey. She did not know what it would hold, but she felt ready, strengthened. By the steps she had already taken, she knew that true courage was not a single action, but a path walked each day, a choice to be strong and a choice to be kind. And she was determined to keep walking that path no matter where it led. The next morning, Keisha woke before her alarm. Sunlight spilled through her window and warmed her face. She lay still for a moment, listening to the soft hum of the house. Her grandmother was already up, humming as she prepared breakfast downstairs. Keisha swung her legs over the side of the bed and stretched, feeling the comforting ache of muscles that had grown stronger in the past week. Today was the last day before the weekend, and she felt a light excitement in her chest. It's the kitchen table. Her grandmother placed plates of scrambled eggs and toast before her. The warm steam rose, and the smell of butter made Keisha's stomach rumble. They sat together in companionable silence, sipping orange juice. Keisha's grandmother looked at her with pride. "You've grown so much," she said softly. Keisha smiled and reached over to squeeze her grandmother's hand. "I feel stronger," she admitted. Walking to school, Keisha noticed how the trees along the sidewalk had sprouted new leaves. The air smelled of fresh grass. She paused to breathe it in, feeling calm and ready. When she reached the school gate, she greeted other students by name. They returned her smile. No one whispered or stared in judgment. The courtyard felt lighter today, as if only good things could happen here. In homeroom, the teacher asked for any announcements. The class president stood and spoke of the kindness assembly held 2 days ago. She reminded everyone of the together. We stand poster in the hallway, and she invited students to sign a new pledge board to promise acts of kindness. Keisha watched as her classmates lined up to write on the board. Some wrote, "Help a friend in need." Others wrote, "Speak up when you see bullying." When it was Keisha's turn, she wrote, "Keep being brave and kind." The teacher nodded at her words and smiled. During English class, Mrs. Davis announced a new project. Each student would write a short essay about a time they overcame fear. Keisha felt a flutter in her stomach. She knew exactly what she would write. When Mrs. Davis asked for volunteers to share ideas, the amber-eyed girl raised her hand. "I want to write about learning to ask for help," she said. Keisha looked at her friend and gave her an encouraging nod. The boy who had been the main bully sat near the back, flipping through his notebook. For a moment, he caught Keisha's eye and offered a small wave. She waved back, and her heart felt warm. Recess came, and Keisha headed to the playground. She saw Jasmine and Miguel waiting by the swings. They called her over and told her they were planning a kindness club. They wanted to meet after school twice a week to plan small events, a note-leaving station for positive messages, a book drive for younger students, and a weekly compliment corner. Keisha's eyes lit up. "I'd love to help," she said. They smiled and hugged her. She felt a thrill of joy at being part of something positive. After lunch, math class felt easier than ever. Keisha helped a classmate understand a tricky problem. The classmate thanked her, and the teacher praised her patience. Keisha felt proud, but her pride felt gentle, not like bragging. It was the pride of someone who had worked hard and wanted to share her knowledge. When the final bell rang, Keisha packed her bag and headed to the art room. The Kindness Club had its first meeting there. A dozen students gathered around a long table covered with markers, poster board, and sticky notes. Asmin handed out sheets of paper, and Miguel wrote the club's name in bright letters. The amber-eyed girl sketched a logo of two hands reaching out. Keisha cut out heart shapes from colored paper and wrote "You Matter" on each one. As she worked, she felt her friends laughing and talking. They planned their first event, a surprise note campaign where students could pick up a note and leave it in someone's locker. After the meeting, Keisha walked home alone, the afternoon sun warming her back. She replayed the day in her mind, signing the kindness board, making plans, helping classmates. She realized how much things had changed since the first morning. When she felt alone and afraid, now she felt part of a community. When she reached home, her grandmother greeted her with a hug. "Tell me about your day," she said. Keisha sat at the kitchen table and described every moment, from the pledge board to the kindness club. Her grandmother listened, her eyes shining with love. When Keisha finished, her grandmother said, "You have started a ripple of kindness. It will spread far beyond your school." Keisha nodded, feeling tears of joy in her eyes. That evening, after dinner, Keisha climbed into bed and opened her journal. She wrote about how fear had filled her on day 1 and how courage and kindness had filled her by day 5. She drew a small circle of hands around her name at the center. Then she wrote, "Today I chose to shine light instead of darkness." She closed her journal and placed it on her nightstand. She lay back against her pillow, her mind calm and her heart full. The soft hush of her room, she thought of her grandmother's words that kindness could heal and bravery could inspire. She thought of her friends, of Jasmine and Miguel, of the art girl, and even the boy who had been her bully. She thought of the kindness club waiting to write messages tomorrow. She felt a gratitude that warmed her soul. Sleep, she replayed one clear image, herself standing by the kindness board, writing those words that would remind anyone who read them that they mattered. She drifted into dreams where the playground was a circle of children all reaching out, hands joined, laughter ringing like bells. In her dream, the world felt safe, and she felt free. When she woke the next morning, she would face new challenges, but she felt ready. She had learned that true strength lay not only in self-defense, but in the power to forgive, to reach out, and to build kindness. She had learned that she was never truly alone when she stood tall and spoke from her heart. And as she closed her eyes one last time, she knew that her journey would continue, one brave and kind choice at a time.